We begin with a question that pierces deeper than most are willing to go. Why do people cheat? Not just in relationships, but in life, in games, in business, in systems, in trust. What is it that drives a human being, fully aware of the consequences, to violate the very boundaries they once agreed to? From the outside, it may look like a flaw in character, a simple lack of morality. But from the inside, the story is far more complex, more human, more disturbing, and perhaps even more relatable than we'd like to admit.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
You see, the psychology of cheaters is not just about betrayal. It's about identity. It's about the tension between what we want and who we are expected to be. There is often a moment, subtle and quiet, when a person recognizes they are two things: the self they show the world and the self they have hidden, even from themselves. This fracture, this internal division, is the breeding ground for deception. And when we cheat, we are not merely lying to others, we are escaping from the version of ourselves that we can no longer tolerate. We live in a culture that idolizes success, pleasure, and freedom, but only within certain rules. When the rules feel too tight, too rigid, too suffocating, some people break them. Not because they're evil, not because they're heartless, but because they are fractured. Because somewhere along the way, they began to believe that they were not enough. So they reach for someone outside the lines. And in that moment, they feel alive again, seen, powerful, free. But this freedom is counterfeit. It comes at a cost. Cheating is not just the breaking of a promise, it is the collapse of internal integrity. It creates a cognitive dissonance so intense that the mind must justify, distort, and rewrite reality to survive. I wasn't happy. They don't understand me. Everyone does it. These are not explanations. They are shields. And behind those shields is a person who has lost touch with their own center. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on I can't believe you." The true damage of cheating is not in the act, it's in the erosion of trust, both in others and in ourselves. Because once you cheat, you must become someone who cheated. And that identity, even if hidden, whispers through every future interaction. It creates shadows. It creates fear. It creates distance. Let's go deeper. What if cheating is not just a behavioral flaw, but a psychological symptom? The symptom of disconnection. A symptom of emotional starvation. A symptom of suppressed desire. Often, cheaters are people who have built their lives around roles: husband, wife, CEO, provider, achiever, but have never fully integrated their emotional reality. They became what they were supposed to be, and in doing so, abandoned what they truly are. This abandonment creates a void, and instead of facing it, they fill it with attention, with escape, with secrets. Because secrets give us a false sense of control. They allow us to live two lives, one seen, one hidden. But the human psyche is not designed for duplication. We are not built to carry double selves. Eventually, the weight becomes unbearable. Something cracks. Often, it begins with a moment of disillusionment or a crisis. A deep internal misalignment that whispers, "This isn't it." The job, the marriage, the routine, it all feels hollow. And instead of facing that emptiness with courage, some seek a shortcut, a detour. a thrill. That's where cheating begins. Not in the act, but in the avoidance of truth. But the most terrifying truth is this: many people who cheat still love the person they betray. They don't cheat because they want to destroy the relationship. They cheat because they feel lost within it. They cheat not out of hatred, but out of desperation. And this is what makes it so hard to understand. How can love and betrayal coexist? How can someone who once promised forever find themselves in someone else's arms? The answer lies in the complexity of human psychology. We are not linear creatures. We carry contradictions. We want security and novelty. We want intimacy and independence. We want to be known and yet remain mysterious. And when we don't know how to hold these opposites, we act them out. We reach for something forbidden not always to get it, but to feel again. At its core, cheating is rarely about sex. It is about unmet needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs, the need to feel desired, and the need to feel significant, the need to feel alive. And if we do not learn to meet those needs within ourselves and within our relationships, we will seek them elsewhere, often in destructive ways. But here's the deeper question: why do we wait until we are starving to feed our soul? Why do we ignore the signs of discontent until it becomes betrayal? Is it fear? Is it pride? Is it the belief that suffering is normal? Many of us were raised to endure, not to express, and to suppress, not to explore. So we build lives that look perfect on the outside but are cracking from within. Cheaters often carry deep wounds, unresolved childhood trauma, abandonment, shame, feelings of unworthiness. These wounds create unconscious patterns. They act out old stories in new relationships. They sabotage love because they don't believe they deserve it. They test connection because they fear it will disappear. And unless they heal those wounds, they will keep repeating the cycle. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Cheating is often the result of unconscious forces made manifest. It is not fate, it is unawareness. And awareness, while painful, is the only way out. We must also understand that cheaters are not a different species. They are not those people. They are us. We all carry the potential for betrayal within us. We all have moments of weakness, confusion, temptation. To pretend otherwise is to lie to ourselves. The difference is not in morality, it is in mindfulness. In the ability to pause, reflect, and choose. So what can we do? First, we must tell the truth to ourselves. What are we missing? What are we pretending not to feel? Where are we out of alignment? These are not easy questions. They require courage, but without them, we drift. Next, we must learn to communicate. Not just surface-level talk, but soul-level truth. We must be able to say, "I feel lonely. I feel invisible. I feel disconnected." And we must be able to hear those things without defensiveness. Relationships fail not because of conflict, but because of silence, because we stop being real. We must also learn to hold space for complexity. Sometimes, the person who cheats is not a monster, they are a mirror. A mirror of what is broken, not just in them, but in us, in the relationship, in the culture. We must ask, what were they missing? What were they running from? What were they trying to feel? This does not excuse betrayal, but it does explain it. And in understanding, there is the possibility of healing, of change, of growth. Because sometimes cheating is not the end of love, it is the beginning of a deeper reckoning. A wake-up call, a threshold moment. But this is only possible if we are willing to face the truth. Not just the truth of what happened, but the truth of who we are. Why we chose what we did, why we allowed certain patterns, why we ignored certain signs. Healing begins when blame ends. And now I ask you quietly, honestly, is there a part of you that has been cheating not on someone else, but on yourself? A part of you that has been living half-heartedly, hiding, pretending, performing? What would it mean to stop? To come home to your integrity? To live in such a way that you never have to lie again? The psychology of cheaters is not a study in weakness. It is a study in fragmentation, in the human capacity to drift from self. But it is also a study in return, in the possibility of radical honesty, of spiritual repair, of facing the mirror and choosing change. Because in the end, cheating is not just about others, it is about us. About how we relate to truth, about whether we are willing to live openly, or whether we continue to fracture ourselves for the illusion of freedom. And the question is, are you ready to stop running? We cannot explore the psychology of cheaters without asking a terrifying and yet necessary question: could I do it too? Could I, under the right pressure, at the right moment of weakness, in a storm of unmet needs and emotional neglect, make the same choice? Most people are quick to say no. We separate ourselves from cheaters as if they are broken, immoral, fundamentally different from us. But that is a lie. That is the lie we tell ourselves to stay comfortable. Because the truth is harder, the capacity to cheat lives in all of us. As long as we are human, we are vulnerable to fragmentation. Cheating is not an act that comes out of nowhere. It is a long buildup of ignored feelings, silent discontent, unresolved inner conflict. It is a slow erosion of intimacy with the self. First, you lie to yourself. Then you lie to others. By the time the external betrayal happens, the internal betrayal has been going on for years. That's what makes it so dangerous. It grows in the shadows. It feeds on denial, on busyness, on distraction. And by the time we notice, it has already devoured something precious. We must begin to see that cheating is not merely about infidelity, it is about infidelity to values, to inner truth, to commitments. That includes cheating on your own vision for your life, cheating on your potential, cheating on your dreams by settling for what's comfortable. Cheating is not always physical, it can be emotional, mental, spiritual. Every time we break faith with who we truly are, we participate in a kind of self-inflicted betrayal. Have you ever made a choice that you justified in the moment, only to regret deeply later? That moment of justification is the crack in the dam. It's the place where desire overrides wisdom, where impulse silences conscience. We rationalize, we minimize, but deep down we know. The body knows, the soul knows, and it carries that knowing like a weight, even as the mind tries to forget. The cheater is not always a villain. Sometimes they are someone who has never been taught how to sit with emptiness, how to face discomfort, how to say, "I'm hurting," instead of acting out that hurt. We live in a culture that teaches us to fix pain quickly, buy something, take something, escape with someone. But true healing doesn't come from escape. It comes from presence, from staying with what hurts long enough to understand it. When someone cheats, it reveals their relationship with discomfort. Can they sit with their dissatisfaction, or must they avoid it? Can they express their needs vulnerably, or must they manipulate for them? Cheating is often the result of an undeveloped emotional vocabulary. Instead of saying, "I feel unseen," the cheater proves it by seeking visibility elsewhere. Instead of saying, "I feel powerless," they assert power through secrecy. It's not about the affair, it's about unspoken pain. Think about the patterns of cheaters. Often, they are not lying just to others, they are lying to themselves. They create elaborate mental architectures to maintain their self-image. They tell themselves, "It's not that bad," or "I deserve this." They create a double life, not just in behavior, but in consciousness. And that split between who they are and who they pretend to be is what slowly fractures their sense of reality. This double life has consequences. It creates anxiety, paranoia, guilt, shame. The cheater becomes trapped in an emotional loop, pleasure followed by guilt, guilt followed by justification, justification followed by more betrayal. It becomes a cycle. And the longer it lasts, the more numb they become. Because to feel the full weight of their actions would be unbearable. So they dissociate. They disconnect. Not just from others, but from themselves. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But what happens when the self we make is based on deception? What happens to a person who lives in contradiction? Eventually, the mask becomes the prison. The performance becomes exhausting. And the only way out is radical honesty. Cheating forces us to confront our relationship with truth. Are we willing to live in alignment, even when it's inconvenient? Or are we willing to trade truth for temporary dopamine? This is not just about relationships. It's about everything. Are we cheating in our work, cutting corners, pretending to care, performing for approval? Are we cheating in our friendships, showing up physically but not emotionally? Are we cheating in our inner life, saying we want growth, but avoiding the discomfort it requires? If we are honest, we have all cheated in some way. We've all stepped outside of integrity. We've all told the story that suits us. The difference is in what happens next. Do we justify? Do we stay asleep? Or do we wake up, take responsibility, and begin again? Healing from cheating, whether as the one who cheated or the one betrayed, is not a quick fix. It is a deep psychological reckoning. It requires looking into the mirror and asking hard questions. Why did I do what I did? What was I really seeking? What part of me was I trying to fill? These questions are not for judgment, they're for understanding. Because without understanding, there is no transformation. For the one who is cheated on, the pain is often unbearable. It's not just about the act, it's about what it means. It shatters safety. It breaks the narrative. It makes them question everything. Was any of it real? Who is this person I thought I knew? And perhaps the hardest question, was it my fault? The answer to that last one is complex. No one causes another person to cheat. But relationships are co-creations, And often the betrayal reflects not just one person's shadow, but the shadow of the entire dynamic. The path of healing is not linear. It is filled with rage, grief, confusion, numbness. And yet, within that chaos is a hidden opportunity, the chance to rebuild not just the relationship, but the self, and to reclaim boundaries, to speak truth, to decide consciously what kind of love you want to participate in. For the cheater, healing begins with full ownership, not excuses, not "it just happened," but a courageous and clear acknowledgement of choice. I did this. I hurt you. I crossed a line. That willingness to take total responsibility is rare, but it's the only way forward. Without it, the cycle will repeat. And then comes the repair. The slow, painful, honest work of rebuilding trust. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be demanded. It must be earned, over time, through consistent action and vulnerability. And sometimes, the relationship cannot be saved. Sometimes the damage is too deep. But even then, the healing can be real. We must also reflect on the cultural context. We live in a world where cheating is normalized in subtle ways. Reality shows glorify betrayal. Music celebrates disloyalty. Social media makes temptation constant. We are told to follow our desire, but we are not taught how to be accountable for it. We are encouraged to chase pleasure, but not to understand its cost. So what do we do with this? We begin by telling the truth, to ourselves, to each other. We begin by asking better questions. What do I want from love? What does integrity mean to me? How do I handle unmet needs? Where am I lying in my life? We begin by creating spaces where honesty is safe, where people can express discontent without fear, where we talk about attraction, temptation, boredom not as sins, but as human experiences. Because when these things are repressed, they become dangerous. But when they are acknowledged, they can become opportunities for deeper intimacy. We must also learn to forgive not just others, but ourselves. Not to excuse the behavior, but to release the shame. Shame keeps us stuck. It keeps us fragmented. But accountability, paired with compassion, leads to wholeness. And so I ask you, where in your life are you out of alignment? What truth are you afraid to speak? What would it mean to live fully in integrity, not just in public, but in private? Could you live in such a way that your inner world and outer world match? The psychology of cheaters is not about monsters. It's about mirrors. It's about seeing the parts of ourselves we'd rather deny. It's about facing the pain we pretend isn't there. And ultimately, it's about choosing truth, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Because truth is the only thing that can hold love. Without it, everything crumbles. But with it, everything can be rebuilt. There comes a moment in every journey of betrayal, whether you were the one who cheated or the one who was betrayed, when the dust begins to settle. And in that silence, something else appears, the invitation. Not the invitation to return to how things were. That's gone. That world is broken. The invitation is to rebuild not what was, but what could be. A new identity, a new relationship to self, a new understanding of love, truth, and power. The psychology of cheaters does not end in destruction. It only begins there, What follows is the potential for radical transformation, if and only if we are willing to walk through the fire. What most people don't realize is that cheating, while devastating, is also revelatory. It reveals what was hidden. It shows us the cracks in our foundation. It brings to the surface the conversations we were too afraid to have, the needs we were too ashamed to voice, the wounds we never truly addressed. In this way, the betrayal becomes a portal. A painful one, yes, but also a sacred one, because what is revealed can be healed. What is exposed can be transformed if we have the courage to stay present with it. For the one who cheated, the path forward is not about redemption in the eyes of others. It's about redemption in the eyes of the self. Can you look at what you've done, not with self-hatred, but with ruthless honesty? Can you face the part of you that acted out of fear, out of need, out of confusion, and meet it with responsibility? Not shame, not denial, responsibility. That is the beginning of integrity, the willingness to stop lying to yourself. You must ask yourself, who was I pretending to be? Who was I trying to escape? What was I unwilling to confront within my life, my relationship, my identity? These questions are not punishments. They are keys. Each one unlocks a deeper truth. And with every truth we face, we become more whole. Not clean, not perfect, but real. And in a world that's addicted to performance, being real is a revolutionary act. For the one who was betrayed, the healing is just as deep. Because the story you believed in was shattered. And in that collapse, there is grief not just for what happened, but for what you thought you had. You grieve the version of your partner who never existed. You grieve the version of yourself who felt safe, who believed in certainty. And eventually, you grieve the illusion of control. Because love, at its core, is never fully safe. It is a risk. Every time. But grief is not the end. It is the beginning of clarity. You begin to ask, what do I deserve? What boundaries did I ignore? What truths did I silence in order to keep the peace? Because often, the betrayal we experience reflects a betrayal we allowed slowly, quietly, over time. Not because we are weak, but because we are human. Because we are taught to prioritize harmony over honesty, survival over truth. This is why betrayal is so transformative. It forces us to confront the places where we abandoned ourselves, where we tolerated what hurt, where we chose comfort over courage. And in that confrontation, we reclaim ourselves. We draw new lines. We find our voice. We remember our worth not as a concept, but as a felt reality. The psychology of cheaters, then, is not about condemnation. It's about recognition. Recognition of the human tendency to avoid pain, to reach for shortcuts, to seek validation in the arms of another when we cannot find it within. And once we recognize this, we can begin to rebuild a life based on something stronger than performance, a life built on truth. So the real question becomes, are we willing to live in truth? Not just when it's easy, but when it's excruciating. Are we willing to speak the difficult words, to ask for what we need, to admit when we're lost, to love without clinging, to let go when it's time, and to stay when it's hard but right? These questions are not for the faint of heart, but they are the only way to move beyond betrayal into a life of depth and meaning. we also must examine our cultural myths about love. We are taught that love means possession, permanence, predictability. But real love is wild. Real love is uncertain. Real love is a practice of presence, of listening, of returning again and again. And sometimes love means walking away, not in anger, but in clarity. Because healing does not always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means release. If you've cheated, the work is not to beg for forgiveness, it's to become someone who no longer needs to lie. Someone who no longer seeks external escape because they've learned to face their inner world. This is not about punishment, it's about embodiment. To embody integrity so fully that deception no longer feels like an option. Not because you're afraid of getting caught, but because truth feels better in your body than hiding ever did. If you've been cheated on, the work is not to punish. It's to reclaim, to return to yourself, to rebuild a life that reflects your values, to learn how to trust not blindly, not quickly, but wisely. Trust is not about going back. It's about moving forward with eyes open, with heart open, with boundaries clear and voice strong. This is the deep work, the unseen work. The work that doesn't always get applause but changes everything. Because when we heal our relationship with truth, we heal everything else. We no longer cheat on our dreams. We no longer cheat on our principles. We no longer cheat on the present moment by escaping into distractions. We show up fully, and from that place we can create relationships that are not just safe but sacred. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all." Cheating is one of the ways we lose ourselves. Slowly, quietly. But it doesn't have to end there, because we can also choose to return, not to the life we had, but to the self we lost. And from that place, everything changes. So what does it truly mean to live in alignment? It means your actions match your values. Your words match your truth. Your relationships reflect your soul. And when you fall out of alignment, as we all do, you notice it. You pause, you reflect, you realign. This is the practice. Not perfection, but presence. And so I leave you with this final question, perhaps the most important one. Are you willing to live in such a way that you never need to hide? Are you willing to build a life so honest, so integrated, so rooted in truth, that betrayal is no longer a temptation, but a foreign language your soul cannot speak? Because that is the path. Not the easy one, but the real one. The one that leads not just to love, but to liberation. And that is the ultimate redemption, not to be forgiven, but to be transformed.